week 4 review. So week 3, you had 3 stories to read. Didn't share with you the author or the biography of the author. And in general, I did it for a very specific reason, but I would have to say overall, looking at my tallies here, is that everybody pretty much chose, and it was actually decently close, but the number 1 story was Triumph of the Mechanic, which was a very well written story. Personally, actually, my favorite to read as well. And then the second one, the second highest, was Sultana's Dream, which was great. And then the third one was The Star. So ranking wise, number 1, Triumph of the Mechanic came in first. Sultana's Dream came in relatively close second, and then actually reasonably further behind was number 3, The Star. And you reviewed it, and I thought the reviews of your story were very insightful, and I think your comments were great, and I was very proud of what people submitted, so great work. Yeah, it was awesome. But then on week 4, I gave you the bios and asked you, does this change your opinion? Yes or no? Why? Stuff like that. And that was a bit more interesting because now all of a sudden you found out that, the number 1 choice you had done was Triumph of the Mechanic, which was written by a Nazi. And then number 2 was Sultana's Dream, was written by this female Indian author. And both of those stories only got to convert to English in over, I believe, the last 15, 20 years. So those were not written in English. Those were written in their, obviously their native tongue, and then converted to English more recently and put into the big book of science fiction. And then the third was written by H.G. Wells, the grandfather, the big deal to Star Wars historically. Wow, let's try that again. The big kahuna in regards to science fiction genre and the huge impact he created in it and the exposure and the skill of writing. But most of you ranked that story the lowest, and to be honest, I would have too when reading them, is partly the language used is a bit of a different style, which was a bit more common back in that day, but it also made it a little more difficult to read. I think the content of the story was good, but the readability was much harder. I think most people agreed when, reviewing the 3. The point to the story actually, I think, was probably for The Star, when you actually look back, is actually really good. It's a matter of perspective, right? When all these things happening, and when you're in a micro level, it's world ending, it's destroying, and then you have this step back from afar, as they would say, a 10,000 foot view. In this case, maybe a 1,000,000 foot view. But the idea is that, I thought it'd be a worse impact. It wasn't that big a deal when it wasn't directly involving you, and I thought that was really good. Triumph of the Mechanic had first of all, stories written in that time period in general had a moral to the story or a purpose. It wasn't just entertainment or this. They were trying to tell you something or educate you on something or make you think at least. So it was actually quite good. I really did enjoy Triumph of the Mechanic. I liked the sort of twisted ending on it. I thought that was really good as well, and well done. But then when you found out they had these different reviews in the sense of viewpoints, some people did change your opinion. Some weren't even super happy that they read it. But let's give the counterpoint or a few things. The reason I did it, was to get everybody to start thinking along the lines that, a good story can be written by anybody, I find, especially myself and a lot of North Americans, and I wouldn't say it's not true for others. For example, I know we have a lot of international students in this program. I'd be curious your opinion on it, actually. But the thing is that we get caught up in thinking the way we do things is the best. I would say that is a general fact in the sense that, we think all the best technology comes out of North America. We, as a North American, we often think that way. But the thing is, there's many examples of that not being true, but we sometimes get caught up in our more small bubble and believe those things. And so that goes from everything from our perception of what is right and wrong, because different areas have that, to political structures, from democracy, in our case, to, some countries definitely not having that. Even China is viewed as a hybrid political structure. They do have some democracy, but they also do have some aspects of communism. And so you have other countries that are communist. And so the thing is perception's interesting. The other thing to keep in mind is that I don't believe anybody in a country or looking at their country thinks they're in the wrong or that they're the bad ones. So, I mean, a Nazi carrying card member, he may very well have believed he was doing the right thing and doing it for the right reasons. I mean, I personally, of course, don't believe anything that went through on the Nazis regime was the right thing. But the problem was that their perception of it was right. And so please keep in mind when you're reading this, they weren't doing this thinking they're bad or evil or they're, you know, it's not like the movies where the bad guys know they're the bad guys when you go to the older ones. In this case, it's just they were fighting to win in the way they fought, and that's how they did it. So, and then, you know, Sultana's Dream, dealing with the inequality between men and women in that story, you know, and that underlying aspect was very interesting, and it was, I mean, written at a very tough time for women writers, and it was, you know, quite interesting because it would have taken a lot of bravery for her to write that and share that story, and for it to actually become more well known later in life, you know, past her death. I think it's important because it just shows how hard the fight and struggle could be for people feeling that the way they have it is wrong. So it's just an interesting component, and interesting to listen to all the stories. So I appreciate everyone's feedback. I thought the commentary was very good, insightful, well done. Some of it more emotional, and I get that. I'm half German, but I always find it interesting. So one of the reasons I do this is partly is because when my Opa came here to Canada, he had defected from the war. What a lot of people don't understand is that in his case, you know, it's not like here where he had a choice. Opa never voted for Adolf Hitler. He voted against him, but the challenge became the fact that you have to understand is that Adolf Hitler, when he was elected, he didn't get elected based on doing these horrible things. He got elected as a nationalist. For example, right now in the US, Trump got elected based on his focus on nationalism, meaning, you know, focus in-house, which isn't a bad thing, but that was what got him elected, not what he ended up becoming. Once he had the power, then he changed and focused on controlling the media, and then that's when things really went off the rails. So, I mean, my Opa hated Hitler, but when two men come to the door and say, hey, you're fighting in the war, and if you say no, that's fine, but we're going to shoot your child and your wife in front of you, and then you can stay home. That's the option he was given. So that's not much of an option. So it's people always need to keep in mind that just because people fought in the German army doesn't mean they actually were pro Hitler or pro the Nazi aspect of it. Actually, most things I've ever read would argue that less than 2 to 5% were really ultra focused on the Nazi aspect. The rest were just doing what they needed to survive and stay alive. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at it. It's just meant to give you a perspective, is that when you do these things, you know, sometimes you gotta look at the whole side of the story. In general, the victor gets to write the story. We've seen that throughout history, but we're starting to see changes in that too. I mean, in Canada right now, we're doing a huge push and focus to, you know, help equalize, you know, the wrongs we did to Aboriginals when we first came here, and you know, and the things afterwards. But it takes a long time for stuff like that to happen because, like I said, you know, the victors write the story, right? So it's not always about good and bad as much as who one gets to write it. And actually there's a TV show right now on called, I believe it's High Castle. I was just about to start it. And, you know, it's the perspective, what if the Nazis had won the war versus the US type idea. And so I haven't watched it, but I hear the concept's quite interesting, so I plan to check it out. I have watched a lot of the Titan show, really good. Just finished season 1, super stoked. Going to go watch season 2. It's a fun one if you haven't had a chance. Titans, it's based off the Teen Titans from the comic book, roughly, like very loosely, but same type of characters, many similar ones, and so it's really good. Enjoying it a lot, especially being an old comic book reader. So if you haven't tried one, give that a try. I've got on my list a couple Bollywood movies. I will hopefully be able to update there because I do want to diversify my watching. And Altered Carbon was one that was highly recommended that I'll also make sure I try to start getting in because the teaser just came out, I think, today for season 2. So anyway, if you didn't see it, go on YouTube. I hear it just came out today. Okay, anyway, great job, everyone. Keep it up. And yeah, next week, Star Wars and Marvel. Super stoked, super fun for me. I love that genre in that area. Okay, have a good day.